Welcome to The Good News is Better Than You Think, Chapter 12. What is a curse? The cross plays a central part in the salvation of humanity. A person cannot read through the New Testament without recognizing this fact. The crucifixion of Jesus was a predetermined aspect of the plan of salvation, something designed by God and His Son before the ages. The apostles understood the significance of the cross, and it was always at the center of their teaching. Paul wrote, "But we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jews a stumbling block, and unto the Greeks foolishness." 1 Corinthians 1 verse 23. "For I determined not to know anything among you, save Jesus Christ, and Him crucified." 1 Corinthians 2 verse 2. Paul preached Christ, but notice his emphasis. It was not just Christ who was at the center of his message, but Christ at a certain point of his experience, Christ crucified. Why is Calvary so significant? What really happened there on the cross? This is a question which will require all the years of eternity for us to fully answer it. But in spite of this, even today, there is much which we can glean by studying this subject carefully. Redeemed from the curse. Let us begin by considering Galatians 3 verse 13. "Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, Cursed is everyone that hangeth on a tree." Galatians 3 verse 13. The Apostle Paul says that Christ redeemed us from a certain curse, and that this curse was the curse of the law. Christ bought us back from this curse, but how did He do it? He did it by Himself becoming a curse, by taking this curse upon Himself. In proving the point, Paul quotes from Deuteronomy 21 verse 23, which states that everyone who hangs on a tree is accursed of God. Christ was hanged on a tree, therefore He was cursed, and in this way He bore the curse, and that is the way He delivered us from the curse. There are a few questions which we must ask ourselves if we are to understand this issue properly. What is a curse? What does it mean that we were under the curse of the law? And how did Christ take this curse, thereby delivering us from it? What is a curse? A curse is a sentence of disaster. This concept exists even outside of the Bible. Most of us probably know a story about somebody who was cursed and consequently was plagued by all kinds of bad luck. This is a popular theme in storybooks. This idea has some truth to it. In the book of Numbers in chapter 22, we read that Balak, king of Moab, sent for Balaam to curse Israel. Israel was invading Palestine and defeating every nation that stood in their way, and Moab was next in line. Balak was aware that everything that Israel did succeeded, and he recognized that he would never defeat these people without special help. So he sent for Balaam, because Balaam had a reputation. He was a prophet of God, and whoever he blessed was blessed, and whoever he cursed was cursed. But when Balaam arrived, every time he opened his mouth to curse Israel, he found himself pronouncing blessings, not curses, and this tells us something else. It tells us that a curse is not something that one person can put upon another. A person can express a curse. He may speak the words of a curse, but one person does not have the ability to bring bad luck upon another. This idea is common in human thinking, but it is not the biblical idea of a curse at all. As an example of what I mean, let us look at Matthew 23. In this passage, it is Christ who is speaking to the Jews. "Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in your synagogues, and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation." Matthew 23 verses 33 to 36. Never was there a more solemn, a more terrible curse pronounced upon a people. This sentence was fulfilled when the Romans besieged Jerusalem. The conditions which came upon the Jews were so terrible that starving women began to eat their own children. When the Roman armies finally broke into the city, Jewish blood ran in the streets of Jerusalem like water. Curses are self-imposed. This was a curse. But who was it that cursed Israel? Jesus spoke the words, but who was it that cursed them? The fact is, Israel cursed themselves. Was it Christ who brought these disasters upon them? No, it was their own actions that cursed them. All Christ did was tell them the truth before it happened. He only prophesied of what would happen. It was they who turned away from God and rejected Him entirely, insomuch that He was no longer able to protect them. The result was that Satan was able to work his way with them, resulting finally in the destruction of the nation. As Proverbs 26 verse 2 tells us, "The curse causeless shall not come." The same truth is illustrated in Genesis chapter 9. Here we read that after the flood, Noah became drunk and lay in his tent naked. We are told that his youngest son Ham went in and saw his father's nakedness. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what he did, but the suggestion is that he mocked his father. Some say he did more than that, and that he actually sodomized his father, but the Bible does not specify. In Genesis 9, verses 24 and 25, we read, "And Noah awoke from his wine, and knew what his youngest son had done unto him. And he said unto him, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren." Genesis 9, verses 24 and 25. So Noah awoke and said, "Cursed be Canaan." Who was it that came and looked at him? It was Ham. But strangely, it was not Ham, but Canaan who was cursed. Who was Canaan? He was the son of Ham. Ham did something, and Noah pronounced a curse upon the son of Ham. If Noah had been the person who brought the curse upon Canaan, this would have been a grave injustice on the part of Noah. But it was not Noah who brought this curse upon Canaan. He did not have that power. So why did Noah, under the inspiration of God's Spirit, pronounce a curse upon Ham's son? What principle are we to learn from these verses? There is a rule of life which is inescapable, and it is called the law of consequence. God may pardon the penalty of a person's sin, but consequences remain. In other words, what we do affects our children. A person who picks up a disease as a result of sinful behavior may infect his or her children with that very disease. Later, the person may ask God to forgive the sin. And of course, God will forgive, but the children will not be miraculously healed of the disease just because the person is forgiven. Consequences remain. Noah's son, Ham, had something in his character which would be passed on to his son, Canaan. Somewhere in the future, these attitudes, embedded in the character of Ham's descendants, would result in them becoming servants of his brother's descendants. So the curse fell upon Canaan, not because God arbitrarily decided to punish Canaan, but because Ham transmitted his own habits and attitudes to his son, who in turn transmitted it to the next generation. In fact, God says it goes on to the third and fourth generation, and it really continues for as long as the evil traits remain in the family. These examples bring out a principle which we need to understand thoroughly. In Exodus 20 verse 5, God says, "I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me." Exodus 20 verse 5. How can we explain this? Is it God who arbitrarily decides that when a person does wrong, He, God, will punish that person's son and his descendants generation after generation? Is that the way God is? Absolutely not. One group of people which has suffered a lot is the black race. While it is true that some of the great civilizations of the past have been African, yet it is also true that one of the darkest chapters of human history has involved the enslavement and brutal treatment of Africans, in some cases by their own people. though more often by other races. All throughout the history of humanity, man has enslaved his fellow man. But it seems that this evil has been most fully demonstrated in the enslavement of black people. But where did it start? Generally speaking, Africans are descended from the line of Ham. Ham took a course contrary to God and led his children into that same course. One of the first great rebels against God was Nimrod, who was a descendant of Ham. Nimrod established a kingdom that was in direct rebellion against God. Genesis 10, verses 8 to 10. The curse, the evil characteristics, passed from father to child as Ham's descendants drifted further and further away from the true knowledge of God. As they became more confused, they became more degraded until they eventually began to worship stones and pieces of wood and to engage in some of the most degrading acts. Where does the downward spiral stop when a person is born in a land where people eat people as a natural way of life, where the only gods known are made of wood and stone, and where the most degrading aspects of human nature are commonplace and are considered the normal way of life? What hope does a person have of ever breaking the cycle? It only gets worse. So the curse is really the outworking of natural consequences, and that is one thing we need to understand. Normally, God does not interfere with consequence. He may forgive penalty, but consequences continue. That is the way it is. How can a curse be broken? Let us take note of the fact that God says He visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Can we see an element of hope in that statement? In Genesis 27, Jacob came to his father and by deception and trickery obtained something that belonged to his brother. He stole his brother's blessing. When Esau came in afterwards to receive his blessings, he found that they were all gone, and although he pled with his father to give them to him, his father could not bring them back. Isaac could not change his mind because the blessing, like the curse, was simply a prophecy of the way things would be, and under inspiration of the Spirit, Isaac could not say what was not true. But in verse 40, he said to Esau, "And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother, and it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck." Genesis 27, verse 40. How is a curse broken? God told Esau through Isaac that he would serve his brother, but when the day came that he was able to break Jacob's dominion from his neck, then he would be free from this curse. In order to break a curse, a person has to first come under its power, and then from that position, defeat that power. That is the only way to break a curse. Suppose there had been one man worshipping wood and stone, half naked, out there in the most primitive part of Africa 1,000 years ago. If this man could have come to the knowledge of the true God, what would have happened to his children? The curse would have been broken in his family. There would have arisen in the midst of Africa a tribe of people surrounded by all this darkness who were totally different from those around them. In them, there would have been manifested the purity and the righteousness of true Christianity despite the surrounding ignorance. But it needed one person to break this curse. But how could somebody growing up and living all his life in those circumstances break free from that cycle? Somebody grown and bred in that situation could never break out of it under normal circumstances. The only way was if some new element was introduced into his experience. This is why, even though slavery is such an abhorrent thing, I am thankful that God overruled in this terrible evil to bring about some good. Some of my ancestors came to the Caribbean under these terrible conditions, but it gave an opportunity for many people of African descent to be exposed to the gospel, and because of this, today I am where I am, a child of God and happy with my lot in life. So the later circumstances brought a change, and the new element came into the depraved life of Ham, so that curse was not passed on to me. That curse on Ham has been broken because some new element came into the experience of my ancestors.